Welcome to episode 49 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast, Psyrick and Blaze. This week, footy's returned. It's about damn time. Welcome to March, where the start of the footy season is upon us. Round 0 has occurred, granted only 2 games due to Cyclone Alfred up in Queensland and far north New South Wales. But, you know, it's still opening round. People still have their thoughts and opinions on it. We definitely have our thoughts and opinions on it. But, who knows if we're going to get back onto that part of the topic. But we shall begin with the 2 games that were played. We'll also go through round 1 and our predictions for that. And there's some couple of other news towards the end that we would like to talk about. So, without further ado, let us jump into it. How are you doing, Mr. Psyrick?
Not too bad. Yeah, it definitely felt a bit incomplete, maybe. I didn't really care that much, because if I'm not watching football, I like to do other things. But it's just that stop-start nature. Especially this is very weird, because it's Friday and Sunday. But the good news is, if it was a marquee Saturday game, I probably wouldn't have got to watch it, because I went to a acquaintance of both of us, friend in WA, her party, over the weekend. Had a pretty good time. I familiarized myself with, not hamstring awareness, knee awareness, because she'd set up Just Dance, on a little projector on the outside wall. And a few of them put on some of the Russian songs.
Yes.
Or Russian. One of them was...
Rasputin?
What was it? No, not quite. The other one, Moscow.
Yes.
And it required, the jumping up and down knee move. Classic Russian. Not classic for me.
Your legs were not up for it?
No, I don't have any muscle in my quads. They're just big. They don't really do much. They can't stretch. I only got a bit of meat on them. It's a bit. Yeah. Same as a vestigial organ for me. Vestigial muscle.
Fair enough.
Apart from that, my week was okay. How are you, Blazy?
I'm not doing too bad. It's been a bit of a weird week with public holiday today as we're recording this, being Labor Day, long weekend here in Melbourne. So I spent all of today doing stuff I would normally do on a Sunday. So I did my groceries, cleaned my apartment, etc., etc. Went for my 5k run, as I've been doing every week. I did not beat my best time, unfortunately. It was too hot. Way too warm of a night compared to previous nights.
I feel it.
So that didn't help me at all. But otherwise, I'm not doing too bad. Just, sending my love and support to all of our friends up in Queensland who are dealing with the cyclone. I have thankfully heard that all of my friends up there have gotten their power back. So that's good. But I think internet and stuff like that, it's still here and there.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I got a few Queenslanders and a few different servers, sort of the same. A couple a bit more on the Gold Coast. I think maybe still have their power out, but yeah, as I said, depends on the area. But again, we wish everyone up there the best. Hopefully normalcy will resume sometime soon for them.
Hopefully. And hopefully that also means that, footy also returns to Queensland, because we don't entirely know the situations in regards to Queensland games being played this week for round 1.
Yeah, so, as I said, it will probably be a wait and see, but, as I said, hopefully with I'm assuming that they prepared, I'm honestly thinking, I don't want to go into too much of conspiracy, but I reckon they made the decision before they announced it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When Fagan was saying that they had little intention and were telling their players to board up their home instead, I think the AFL would have been yeah, we can't announce it, but, just do your own thing, we'll look after it. You would hope that they would make the decision after that if it wasn't announced to just close, but...
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway.
Alright.
It's good, and, yeah, as I was saying, compared to the NRL, I much liked their approach of just full-out cancelling the games instead of moving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should mention, because it is news, the Essendon game, Essendon versus Gold Coast, has been shifted to after round 24. That'll be played in the week between the final round and the finals.
Oh,
It's a bit of a pain for Essendon and Gold Coast.
Yeah, it
Best
is.
probable
because
solution.
the way
though.
they're kind of trying to structure it out is the Essendon and Gold Coast games of that specific round will be played at the very start of the round, and then they'll play the Essendon and Gold Coast match against each other at the very end. And hopefully, if they're assuming, the AFL is assuming that these two teams probably won't make finals, which is why they're scheduling it the way that it is. But if they do make finals, they're still going to give them at least the best chance that they can to have enough of a break.
Yeah, exactly. So again, and of course, AFL got a bit lucky with the Brisbane Geelong being as sortable as it can. But yeah, like of all the reasons to hate on Gather Round, like this was pretty freak.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, as much as people are already disliking Gather Round, this kind of just put the nail in the coffin for people's opinions of it.
Yeah.
All right,
But there were still two good of games of football.
yes, there was.
Shall we get into them?
We shall. Let's start with the first one, the Friday night clash between Sydney and Hawthorn up at the MCG. Sorry, the SCG. My bad.
Yeah.
Why is this very small?
And I'm gonna run through both scores, but we will talk about the Sydney Hawthorn game first because, let's face it, we normally just jump into the game and forget about the scores. So the Sydney Hawthorn game was 76-96. That's 11-10 for Sydney and 14-12 for Hawthorn. And then later on, we've got GWS versus Collingwood, 104 15-14 for GWS, 52-6-16 for Collingwood. But yes, on the opening round, Sydney lucking their way into being the match opener. Is it once before? I think it was just once. The Battle of the Bridge.
Yeah, did they open opening round last year?
Yeah, they opened.
Was that Sydney Melbourne?
Ooh, you might be right actually. So they've had three.
Or was that the Sydney Melbourne or Sydney Collingwood? Because it was the Brodie Grundy match.
No, I think it was Sydney Melbourne. I remember it because like there were no dolls that did well in that match, and it was pretty mediocre.
That's right.
I was thinking of the Battle of the Bridge one that they did in like 2018 or whatever it was when GWS started looking good.
Oh yeah, that was that was a
different.
round one opening game, I think, for them.
Yeah. Back in the day when round one was round one. But yeah, let's get into it.
So
And
I'm gonna start with the scores before you forget.
no, I did say the scores.
Oh, I zoned out whilst I was fixing.
I went through them both. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. I see how it is. Anyway, so Sydney won by... Hawthorn won by about 20 points. And I feel like the game was... I feel like a testing the waters game for both teams. Obviously, with all the talk going on Hockball, you know, I feel like we're very much... There's a lot of interest to whether Hawthorn can live up to that. And then for Sydney, obviously, it's the new coach. How are they going to differentiate from last year? You know, that mixed bag of having that regular season success, but that big failure in a final. So, honestly, I think both teams have a couple of good things here and there, but will be wanting to improve on a bit. I think the biggest thing is... From this game, both defences, I feel, sort of took a back seat. As scoring, especially from stoppages and centre clearances, was a big go in this match. Sydney's new defensive lineup, I'm talking about taking Tom McCounten out. Whether that is their new defence will yet to be seen. But for this match, I feel they did actually a really good job of keeping Hawthorn's small forwards fairly quiet. But... Hawthorn just found it a bit too easy to find other avenues of scoring against Sydney, as they're a bit less transitionally defensive as they were to start last year. Last year we saw a lot of running and marking get restricted, maybe not so much early on, but as the game went out, Sydney just sort of outpaced them, outrun them, but in like a more defensive way. Stopped a lot of movement on the wings, where we didn't really see that with this game. Hawthorn, he loved to press up anyway. You know, you got your players like McDonald, Josh Day, the other really good one, Dylan Moore, really took advantage of some of the structural matchups. So, in terms of flow style, I would say Sydney's intercept game, I don't think it was quite on, but they did find some conventional attack with Amadi and McCartan both presenting well. And I want to ask you, would you give a tick to that Sydney forward line with the way that they went?
I think it looked a lot better. I don't think it's entirely all there just yet, but it's definitely a lot better than what they had shown both in their preseason games and at the end of last season, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I don't know about better, but I feel like it's more sustainable. You know what I mean? Like, especially in this game where Heaney probably didn't, or like some of the other Sydney mids didn't quite get involved in direct goal scoring. Like, you still had Chad Warner providing a few, but that was a lot more in forward half stoppages where he normally is.
Yeah.
So, you know, with Hawthorn putting a bit of respect, sort of restricting, I feel like Sydney did find that conventional attack, which is a good sign. And as I said, Papley also presented a lot better in ground level. I'll probably say their forward pressure was a bit off, though. Like, I feel like a lot of it was stoppages, but it was still pretty good. Hawthorn tolls. It was sort of not really there for them at all. Like, it's sort of weird because they scored 96, 14, 12. Like, that's a really good scoreline, but... Sorry, I shouldn't have said tolls. I meant conventional attack. But
yeah, okay.
The tolls weren't really involved. Admittedly, only really Chol. And Ginnivan, Watson was held really well. If you're going to tell me before the match that Sam Wicks was going to play a shutdown defensive role on Nick Watson, I wouldn't have believed you. But he was fantastic.
Yeah, it worked.
And it really took some creativity for them to find goals because, you know, we saw the Sicily move forward in the last quarter and big boy Lloyd Meek, I know you're probably going to talk about him, but geez, he was clutch when it mattered. So, yeah, it was just interesting to see. Like this scoreline, I wasn't not expecting, but just some of the ways that goals were created.
Yeah. It
was sort of the opposite of what I would expect. I thought Sydney would actually be a bit better at cancelling some of that high half forward stuff, but maybe get exposed on ground level because, again, you're running people like Witts or Patton who aren't A-grade defenders. But no, well, maybe not Patton. He left a few goals early, but, you know, it still held up all right. It was just mainly there. Overall pressure that was a bit lacking around the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of movement from them. Like we can see in the stats and just in their overall play that there was a lot of good ball movement, but it just wasn't enough. It wasn't the usual sort of standard. Yeah, and as I said, like, even though they were getting conventional things, like their conversion rate inside 50 was still, just serviceable. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't quite call it bad, especially since it was opening round. But it wasn't anything to write home about. Yeah, agreed.
You know what I mean? In fact, honestly, I think Amadi probably played a bit better than what you would expect. I feel like he was converting a tiny bit above what you would expect him to from his shots and presentations. So I feel like there still needs to be a bit of forward connection from Sydney's midfield, and maybe that will develop if Dean Cox is making the play a bit more conventionally. But yeah, their back half defensively, it wasn't too bad. Again, still get exposed, but I think it was more other stuff. But I want to mention, and it was mentioned a bit in the commentary, I felt like a lot of this was sort of Sydney coming, and they sort of came back into the contest halfway through, and it was by nullifying individual one-on-one matchups rather than systematically. Because we saw Will Day absolutely tear it up in the first half, and then they put Will Day on him. And after those mammoth quarters, he sort of, I think he had a 3 or 4 possession third quarter before having a decent fourth.
Yeah, Jordan did a really good job tagging him.
Yeah, and then Hayward when Sicily was intercepting a lot when he was playing in defence, he sort of shut him down before Sicily did move forward. So, again, props on Sam Mitchell for, obviously Frost coming on a bit earlier than expected. Probably a bit questionable whether he should be the sub, but it did work out in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? Like, Frost was able to play back. He looked a bit rusty, actually. I still maintain that probably wasn't the best move in hindsight, but they did work it. But yeah, as I said, so, again, and adding to that one-on-one battle, Sam Wicks, just a player that you don't expect to be playing that position. Normally playing as like a forward line, maybe a winger player, and plays a shutdown role on Ginnivan. Like, that to trust a player who's probably never really played that position. I'm not sure what he's done in junior level, but you know what I mean? Like, that's pretty gutsy in a round zero matchup. And I really think that Cox may be looking that, as I said, like the system, it worked a bit last year, but there was a lot riding on some really nice conversion. Where I think Cox might be saying, hey, we've got a lot of talented players, especially with our best 22. So we're going to look to be like utilising one-on-one matchups a bit more. And I can see the concept. It didn't work. Well, not didn't work, but I feel like this was an awkward team to like sort of do that against.
Yeah.
But it's also opening round. So you know what I mean? Like, this will take a bit of time. But I don't... Like, it wasn't the best game from Sydney. I didn't hate it. You know what I mean? It was just up against a good opponent. They were a bit off the pace. And yeah, as I said, they were sort of dealt comfortably enough by Hawthorn.
Yeah, I think
pretty much just
I think Sydney
got their game going.
And Dean Cox is like, I think they're definitely cooking up something a little bit special to what like Sydney were even had last year. But it's just going to take a bit of time to really see kind of the vision that Cox is wanting for this team.
Yeah, and I think the last thing to really talk about, because we said a bit about Sydney's defence and all that, but obviously one of the big talking points was Hawthorn's defence, especially the new look with Barris. It was sort of funny because, a lot of people saying, oh, Barris did quite good, and I was like, yeah, he was okay, but I was actually looking back a bit closely, and I think this might be where Hawthorn might find a bit of pain, where they're above, they're marking over their head defence look pretty solid. Like, they were mostly taking a lot of intercept marks. Again, Sicily was fantastic. I think Scrimshaw took a few as well. Barris, I think, got a few more scores in intercepts. But, and Barris, one-on-one, he did give up 2 goals, I think, to Amadi. But I was also looking through, and there was a couple of times where Barris, he just spoiled the ball forward. But there were only Sydney players ahead. And I think this is where Sydney might have been a bit proactive, because they were looking to beat them on the ground ball. And I think they were actually fairly successful in that. So a couple of times Warner got one of them. I think maybe Rowbottom was the other? I can't quite remember. Papley. I think it was Papley.
It might have been Papley.
So, you know what I mean? Like, even though, Barris clearly was probably working himself into the game, like, he did technically concede, if you're being very harsh, 4 goals. So, I feel like, overall, I think Hawks will be, like, fairly fine with it. But there'll just be, like, how do we minimise the loss on ground level?
Yeah.
And, again, that's where Frost is a bit iffy. I'm very surprised, that they were playing, with Weddle, Frost. I thought one of them would take a back seat. Scrimshaw and Battle. Battle was fairly good, actually, I thought. A bit quiet, but, like, distributed when needed and was fairly solid 1v1, so... Yeah, as I said, it's a lot of work. I thought Carl Amon, he did pretty good, but, I don't feel like he's involved as much on the ground, but you know what I mean? It's like... I don't know. It makes it awkward because, again, you get that thing where, like, a player like Blake Hardwick would probably be good at that role. But then, like, with their forward line and, their back line, like, you would probably still prefer him forward. So it gets a bit awkward.
Yeah.
But they'll find that in the next few weeks.
That is the harder issue with swingmen, especially when they're like very good at one role, and sometimes you do need to push them forward, but you'd prefer him in some situations to to risk that forward line and have him more comfortable in defense.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that's going to be an issue that I think Sam Mitchell is going to have to deal with for a bit, with both with Hardwick and with Sicily on that fact, and just to
Ye-
see what the best option is.
Yeah, because it's a bit weird on both accounts. Because again, Sydney were playing like a lot taller than you would think. So, like for this game, you could understand them playing a lot of tolls. But it's so hard because the one or two players that they do have on the ground are very, very good at that role. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you can play four tall down back, just for matchup. But you're still going to need your one player that does play small to be really good at ground level. And, like Sydney found it out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like Sam Wicks, you know, like you can say all about, recruiting, but sometimes if you can get the most out of a left of field player, sometimes that can just fill that role. So sometimes it's more about the structure. And I feel that's just like a little food for thought for Sam Mitchell, I'll say, is just how easy some of the ground level stuff was for Sydney at times.
yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just realized something that will make this a bit harder for me to do later on. Anyway, ignore me. So
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the individual performances. And we'll start with probably one of the best players in the field, being Will Day. He looked pretty
Mm.
much back to his 2023 best, which I kind of mentioned in the community match last week. He kicked 3 goals from 26 disposals, 21 effective, being 80.8% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 6 inside 50s, 9 clearances, 7 from stoppage, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 21 pressure acts, and 454 meters gained. Absolute pressure magnet.
Yeah, and it's just, again, this is the thing where I think, and I haven't really mentioned it, but Hawthorn's midfielder did look a fair bit better on the day. I mentioned that Heaney was a bit quiet and they weren't finding goals, but they're also, uh, I think they lost the clearances, or they were losing the clearances for the first half of the match. I'm not quite sure. I'll have a quick check, but yeah, as I said, Will Day, what I love about Hawthorn is they're just so good inside and outside. And Will Day is just that type of player where he'll position himself in the best chance to connect those people up. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah,
can get the ball, he can link up and then distribute it to more offensive people. And yeah, as I said, so pretty good effort by him. Probably the best half of the round. I'll admit it, small sample size, but that first half was absolutely insane. He controlled that contest.
yeah, absolutely. Next is Jai Newcomb, who was influential through the middle as a ball carrier. He kicked a goal from 19 touches, with 15 of them effective, equating to 78.9% efficiency. 10 contested possessions, 9 clearances, 8 score involvements, 7 tackles, and 25 pressure acts. Again, pretty much same sort of role that Will Day does, just more on ball, more about ball traversal and getting to ball to players that will, take it further afield.
Yeah, as I said, very aggressive because, I guess sometimes they were a bit sloppy. Hawthorn did. I think they gave away a fair amount of free kicks. Actually, it was fairly even, but 23 to 21. But, it was just that style of contested game. And I think, like, he was sort of heading that hard nut inside. And as I said, that's what I mean. Like, the inside out kind of connection with Will
Yeah,
Day. Like, it's so damaging. Like, it's mostly forward of the ball. Newcomb is actually a fairly good two-way runner. Um, but you know what I mean? It's just that, yeah, that connection. Oof, love it.
yeah, absolutely. And then next is Rock Lloyd Meek. He was a defensive bull in the middle, collecting 30 hitouts with 9 to advantage and 14 disposals, 10 of them being effective, equating to 71.4% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 4 marks, 6 clearances, 5 tackles, 20 pressure acts, and 7 ground ball gets. Ground ball gets is always a special one for the tall players because, they're so tall.
I know, especially Big Lloyd Miko. And again, But someone who was just like picked out of nowhere, he just goes to, maybe lost in the shuffle with Freo, with Darcy going ahead of him. And he just got so good so quickly. And that's why you should never judge Tols too early. But for him to be, like, he dominated, bro. I know Brodie Grundy won more taps, but, that connection with his players was so good by Lloyd Meek. And around the ground, he just seemed to outrun him a bit. And I think that's the thing, is like, when you got such a hard-running midfield, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like sometimes that encourages rucks to run a bit more. Like, he's like, well, I got to be, like, in and around, I got to provide a bit of stopgap in the fast movements, in case they need a tall target on the wing. And Lloyd Meek, he's just capable, He's not an athlete, but he's got the tank. I'm really impressed with his last 2 years, especially, well, hopefully this year will continue on, but last year especially.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and it's always good to see the rucks especially playing more of an actual midfield role rather than just being a ruck. And that's what I love about Nankervis, about Sherry, about Grundy as well. Grundy does do it fairly often, but not as much in this game. Max Gawn is something that he's known for.
I say that's like the one concerning thing about Grundy in Sydney is I feel like his marking has dropped off. Like, he's a less transition player, because Collingwood in their heyday really liked Grundy on the wing, taking those marks, providing an avenue for transition. And, maybe it's just the fact that they don't need Grundy as much for that. Obviously, well, in considering a team with Errol Goulden back in, they don't need it as much.
Yeah.
Whereas now I feel like they maybe could utilize that a bit more in Sydney's transition, which off the back half, really wasn't that much on. They didn't really get much going from the back half.
No, it was very much more from a middle perspective.
No, they did. Sorry, I was reading the wrong way. No, their forward half. Yeah, because I remember.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, yeah, you are correct.
The third quarter, they actually did get some run, and it's the band you're about to talk to next.
Yes, it is.
So I'll let you segue into it.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, I was kind of following your lead there, but I was like, hang on a minute. The man that I'm about to talk about did all the work off halfback.
Yeah.
Being, Nick the Lizard Blakey, as he's known as. He was so important off halfback. He kicked a goal from 26 touches, with 21 of them being effective. So that equates to 80.8% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 8 intercepts, 3 marks, 3 score involvements, 6 1%ers, 4 ground ball gets, 6 spoils, and 804 meters gained, which I think is the most meters of the entire round.
Yeah, I remember Callanan getting about 750 and winning for the Giants, so that would track. 730, I should say.
Next is champion Isaac Heaney. As per normal, he was a
sorry. No, I did want to mention something about Blakey.
Yeah,
because I did give him a bit of a hard time last year. Hard time, but, something he could improve on. Like, his defensive efforts. Like, he's not the deepest player. But you know what I mean? He was playing deep this game. I know you said off half-back. That's because he chose moments to run up. So, like, his distribution was half-back. But he was still taking that important back roll. And I thought that was really, really solid. Like, he would stay so disciplined with his defensive. And then when the time went to break, he would just choose his moments, and he was so damaging.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that might be his evolution of his game. I think, if he continues that, no doubt I'd have him for Australian.
Yeah, definitely. Next is champion Isaac Heaney, with a clearance machine throughout the midfield, finishing with 21 disposals, 15 of them being effective, at 71.4% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 10 clearances with 6 of them from the centre, 6 score involvements, 7 tackles, 26 pressure acts, and 9 ground ball gets. And then I'm just going to kind of jump straight into the next player who pretty much did a very similar job, and that's Shad Warner. He put in some solid work, kicking 2-1 from 21 touches, 16 of them being effective at 76.2% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 5 marks, 6 inside 50s, 2 clearances, 12 score involvements, 18 pressure acts, 5 ground ball gets, and 602 meters gained.
Yeah, honestly, even though Blakey's game was really, really good, I think Warner is probably at least around the similar line.
Hmm.
He was so, as I said, Sydney couldn't quite get their direct offense going, and I didn't really want to make it sound like Azakini didn't have a good game, but you know what I mean. He didn't get the goal or two he normally gets per game that
Yeah.
really helped Sydney, but still very involved. I think that was just a systematic issue for this match, especially since they didn't win as many clearances. Heaney, again, pretty good in that role, but they sort of needed someone else to stand up that couldn't quite. But Chad Warner in the around the ground clearances was fantastic. And again, just put a lot of pressure
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure both
offensively.
of Chad's clearances came from stoppages, and I think both of them were in forward 50 as well. Or at least one was like,
50, and
yeah.
I think both of them goals.
Both of them might have equated to his goals, or at least his score involvements.
I know one was, yeah. So yeah, as I said, pretty great game by Chadwick.
Yeah, agreed. As for injuries, Taylor Adams came off with a possibly another hamstring injury late in the match. You don't want to see it, especially as he's fought so hard to actually get back into this team's best 22. Granted, he would probably go out anyway once Golden came back. I'm going to be honest, but it's it is what it is for Sydney. And then James Warple, the Warpedo, subbed out with an ankle issue. It is confirmed that he will miss weeks. I haven't read the article specifically, but it might be syndesmosis, which would make sense for him being out for a couple of weeks. But that's very unlucky for the Hawthorn midfield.
Yeah, so he's sidelined with an injury to his ankle. Yeah, apparently it's called a grade 1 syndesmosis injury.
Okay, so it's the upper echelon of syndesmosis.
It's got its little lunchbox, got its overalls on, starting to learn the alphabet, and we need to get that under wraps.
Yeah, he's gonna be missed.
Yeah, exactly. The only other player I probably should mention, Carl Amon. Again, that mixture of offensive back half movement to defensive back half to offensive. Again, I just want to say because he's just evolved in a lot, and I think this is what we're going to see from Hawthorn. Like, they're not a forward half team. They're one of the few outside dominant teams, I would say, and it's just interesting because it's so different to all the others. Like, I know it's all about Hawkball, Hollywood Hawks, but I think that's what buys into a lot of hype for him. Like the fact that Hawthorn's style is distinctively different from a lot of the top teams that we'll probably see this year. I know Fremantle, I've said, is a bit more of an outside team, but they're a lot more different. They're a wait and see sort of thing. Like, they'll build up, whereas Hawthorn are pretty, I won't say forcing, but they will try and find an avenue when they can for some aggressive ball movement rather than, just chipping around to find it. So, to have a quality player like Carl Amon distributing on the halfback line, scored 1-2 as well as getting nearly 700 meters. Pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, shall we jump over to the Sunday game?
Yes. Jeez. After a pretty great first matchup, I'll say it was pretty great. It was pretty defenseless, and that's, sort of something you don't mind seeing in opening round. I thought, I'd say, like, for an opening round game, we'll scale the, like, Sydney Hawthorn one to maybe a 4-star, you reckon?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, this was like a pushing 2. It was uglier, and don't let the scoreline fool you. Giants getting 104, Collingwood getting 52. A lot of Giants scoring. It was freer, but only in the fourth quarter when Collingwood just run out of legs, really. For the first 3 quarters, this was your typical Giants grind out football. I mentioned last year how the Giants, they'll never play the prettiest football, but they'll just keep on going again and again and again from halfback. Give you nothing, just go again and again and again. And Collingwood, yeah, their conversion Like, I know GWS makes it hard, and this game's probably an exaggeration for what, like, this game probably could have been a lot closer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Collingwood did have opportunities. They were all like general play. They didn't get many natural set shots, but they got plenty of opportunities. It's just, yeah, they had nightmare converting. And as I said, the Giants, you give them enough opportunities of halfback, they'll do enough to get you in front, which they did for most of the game. And then, as I said, they were just blown after the water. But, despite Collingwood winning the clearances and the loss of Briggs, in the first quarter sort of like helped that, they were pretty much smashed both inside and out the contest in transition in that midfield. I mentioned it last year. When their midfield transition gets a bit off, their lines suffer. And I think this was sort of the match that, emphasized that, because they were smashed in defensive half scoring. This is where I made my error. It was Collingwood that had a shocking time from the back half. It was 64-18 in defensive half scores. And it also wasn't a game for conventional forwards after, because when I said this game was ugly, there were a lot of mistakes from the tall forwards, and it was almost everyone.
Yeah.
That's Brzezinski. I thought he actually played really well in place of Hogan. He just dropped a few marks, but still, he got his couple of goals. He presented really well. I like the way his game, so I'll give him a pass. But, Cadman had a really hard time. Callum Brown kicked a couple of goals, in which they were good, but geez, he could not catch anything. Like, if he was a cricketer, he would have been dropped from the amount he was putting ball to turf. But credit to him, he did enough to get the ball for a couple of goals. He got to himself, knocked one on, which happened to get a bit, and absolutely butchered a handball, which somehow bounced back to the Giants player who was able to get a goal. I think it was Darcy Jones. It was like one of the best errors you'll probably see. But yeah, as I mentioned, Collingwood 211 from 18 general play shots. It just killed any semblance of offense for them. And yeah, it's pretty concerning. Like, I know the Giants weren't pretty, but Collingwood, do you read into it much? Like, I know it's only round 0, but it's a lot of the problems we were seeing last year.
I would put more concern on their accuracy rather than just their overall play. One, because it's round 0. I think their overall play will. You'd like to hope as a Collingwood fan would get better as the season goes on, but again, it's just that woeful accuracy that kind of just throws, like, regardless of what you do in the middle, if you can't convert, then what is your point? What exactly are you doing?
Yeah, I do think that the entries were pretty poor, because, I mean, Collingwood's efficiency, especially by the midfield unit, when you look at some of the inside midfielders, some of the outside, you're not seeing too many about the 60-70 range. You know what I mean? We're talking, there was a lot of grinding. And again, it's hard to see just how much was the Giants' defense, because they were fantastic. You know what I mean? Like, they shut down any of the conventional attack. I think Tim Membry, he should have got 2 goals. Run down like a librarian late, with probably one of the more nightmarish moments you can have in your first game for a new club. But you know what I mean? Like, they had bugger all set shots. Mychek, he had his moments in the second quarter, but again, he was pretty quiet anywhere else. McStay, pretty unsighted. Tim Membry, I mentioned before. Hoskin Elliott, 3 misses, sopped out of the game. It was just, I think it was a combination, but yeah, as I said, it's just sort of hard when almost all of your shots are that general ground play, which are harder than your normal set shots. I know we say a lot about set shot kicking, but generally, most times, teams are still kicking better from your set shots than your ground shots. But yeah, as I said, I think it's a bit more. I think it's still got to do with function, and I'm a bit concerned. But on the flip side, Collingwood did play games that looked as bad as this last year,
They did.
and they still finished just outside the eight. So again, it's not too concerning. It's just painful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially because it's going to be another long season, and you want to hope that they don't have such rough performances all over the season. Whereas you'd much prefer them to try and at least tighten things up, especially in their generalized play, and
Yeah.
hopefully their defense, sorts themselves out as well.
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't think their defense was that bad. I know that's maybe a bit controversial considering how much, but like when I looked at the Giants' wings, like some of their best players, like Ward, Daniels was pushing up, O'Halloran, and the debutant James Leake, James, um, they all had really fantastic games, but it was concerning how free they were on the wing. And when you compare that to Collingwood, who again the pressure was put on them, a lot of dump kicks. You know, you can be a forward half team all you like, but as I said, all it takes is chasing you down and then you're going to get a lot of efficient entries. Are you going to get those turnovers? Like Collingwood were the most turnover prone team last year. And if you're not running back, you're just going to get burnt every time. And GWS absolutely exposed that, as I mentioned, by those 4 defensive half scores.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them came from good interception works, especially by a man you'll probably talk about, Sam Taylor. But you know what I mean? He just swallowed everything up, and then it was movement. Like GWS were switched on to that fact. And and you say, oh, Collingwood are old, but Callum Ward, he's an old timer.
He is.
But he was doing the yards. You know what I mean? So it's all well and good to say, oh, you give him a pass, he's such a good ball user, but you still have to have enough players giving that running effort. And if you can't get it from your normal structure, you're going to have to look outside, tinker with things. Because I don't think that midfield can stay the way it was in that game.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like you don't want them getting beaten every week. And that's part of what I said when I watched when I was there for the Richmond v Collingwood community matches. But I thought our midfield performed very well against theirs to the point where I thought we were beating them in some areas. So I don't think it's a good sign. Well, granted, it is a good sign for Richmond in this case, and a very good sign for the Giants in this case. But it's a very bad sign for Collingwood.
Yeah, because, as I said, despite the margin, like, I really think Collingwood were really only system away from being decent. And I know that's a bold claim because, their forward line did look awful, but I feel like it only takes some small adjustments for that connection to be a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And the Giants' defense was just dominant. You know what I mean? Like, that is a hard team to try and generate quality, good inside 50s against.
Yeah.
So I will give them a slight pass, especially in a round 1 game. And, to highlight how good this was, in the third quarter, the Giants did not concede a goal, despite Magpies getting 20 inside 50s for the turn. So goalless from 20. That is pretty decent. Not too many behinds, too. I think it was only maybe 3 or 4 for that quarter. Yeah, the game sort of freed up at the end. Like, Collingwood were gassed. Like, Giants score skyrocketed.
Yeah.
But Collingwood also got a tiny bit. But yeah. I would say, like, are you a bit concerned about Collingwood being gassed in that game, or do you just put it as a round 0 thing?
I think I just put it as a round 0 thing. I just give them more time. I think they'll be fine in that regard, at least.
Yeah. I feel like, as I said, as bad as it was, because, there was some serious cramps. Like, I've never seen, 3 or 4 players all get cramp around the same time in the third quarter. But, I mean, it's not out the realms of happening. Weird things can happen in a game. I don't think cramps is an exact science. Well, I know the mechanisms of cramps is an exact science, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They try and balance players as much as they can, but sometimes, whether it's conditions, whether it's your body adjusting, you know what I mean? It's a threshold. Once you're gone, it's very hard to get that back.
Yeah.
They'll have the pickle juice, but you know what I mean? Like, sometimes when movement's gone, movement's gone. So,
Yeah,
I feel like that was just maybe a bit
sometimes the mind
unlucky.
doesn't get a choice. Sometimes the body will just force a choice upon you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my mind's going back to like university science, um, the threshold, ion, channel pathways, all that sort of stuff. But we won't talk about that. What we will talk about is something a bit more electric, and that is the individual performances for this match. Because there was a few nightmares, but the top end talent really did perform this match.
Absolutely, and especially for the Giants. Finn Callahan was electric, kicking 2-2 from 33 disposals, 28 being effective, equating to 84.8% efficiency. 9 contested possessions, 4 marks, 6 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 12 score involvements, 13 pressure acts, 8 ground ball gets, and 730 metres gained. Influential defender Sam Taylor was inspirational, kicking the opening goal of the match, and then finishing with 17 touches, with 16 of them being effective, equating to 94.1% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 12 intercepts, 13 marks, 4 of them being contested marks, 9 of them being intercept marks, 5 tackles, 5 spoils, and 100% time on ground. And then talented
And
small.
I don't even think he needed pickle juice. I didn't see him take a gulp.
No, like he was just chilling. And then talented small Brett Daniels kept the ball moving, kicking 1-1 from 21 disposals, 13 of them being effective, equating to 61.9% efficiency. Eight contested possessions, 4 marks, 9 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 6 score involvements, 22 pressure acts, 7 ground ball gets, and 481 meters gained.
I do want to say a lot of the talk, and I think that's why a lot of people didn't tip the Giants because they were like, "Oh, they're missing Hogan." Jake Stringer doesn't play, but I feel like they were forgetting how good Brett Daniels is in distribution and how good the other player you haven't mentioned, but had a very good game, obviously, Darcy Jones.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna
Like,
I was gonna mention Darcy Jones, but I was tossing up between the two.
oh well, as I said, we got to mention the Collingwood players. It wouldn't be fair just to lift off old Giants, but
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, and even Xavier Halloran, he took his moments. I don't think he was quite as structurally good. I think he took advantage of a few good team movements, but
mm-hmm.
in terms of individual play, like Darcy Jones can just break a game in a second. He's a very hard matchup, and again. And then you got Brent Daniels, who's like, you have to put an athletic defender on him because he can run a bit. He's more of a grind runner. You don't have to put someone as fast as Darcy on him, but, it's very hard to defend against that. And especially when it's so high because, most teams, as we're seeing, they like to have 2 ball movers and 1 defensive things.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 1 defensive defender on like the high half forward line. And then maybe you put 1 deeper or if you're playing 3 tall, not. But we're seeing teams with a couple of good high half forward players. They're sort of breaking that structure because you're starting to get to that point where that defensive ball movement, and it is harder to score off the defensive half. As good as it is to have good players there, it's also important not to concede the other way because
Yeah.
forward half pressure is still the source of a lot of goals in the league. So it gives a lot of headaches for other opposition teams to think about, and it's only going to get worse once the cavalry comes back for them. I
Yeah,
wouldn't want to be a coach
absolutely.
trying to sort out a defense for them.
Like when I was sourcing out my tips for this game, I wasn't it wasn't necessarily that I was thinking about like that Giants would be worse without Stringer and
Mm.
Hogan and their forward line. It's just that I just wasn't expecting their performance to be this good. Like I was expecting,
Yeah,
with it being round zero, I was expecting, maybe a little bit of a slower sort of style, so a bit of slower movement. But they were fast straight out of the park, and it's very impressive
yeah,
that they kept it up pretty much the whole game.
yeah. Like it's weird because they were dominant. Like as I said, like I feel like this margin could have been like Collingwood again in terms of play weren't that far off the pace. And I think GWS is still going to have to tinker a tiny bit with conversion, but with this lineup, their conversion was actually pretty solid. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, they would have been forgiven from like making this like maybe a 9-17 sort of scoreline. And I know they got easier looks at the end, but still. Um, they just, even early on, found ways to score from not their A team. And as I said, big props to Krasuski for, 100%, but, for the big shoes, still contributed fairly well and was still probably the best tall forward. Unfortunately, Lachlan Keefe obviously had to play as that ruckman once Kieran Briggs went down. So, that even changed that forward line a bit more. But, as I said, it was still pretty clinical.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was.
And I know Collingwood missed a few players, but it was just like there's a lot more systematic issue. Like GWS maybe still finished missing polish, but Collingwood definitely had structural deficiencies. There were decayed teeth, sort of.
Yeah.
And I know that's pretty on the nose to say that about Collingwood, but it really did feel like they have an outer shell of a good team, but they're a bit hollow in the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Collingwood, though, there are a couple of players that I would like to highlight. Ruck Dusty Cameron took full advantage of the space without Briggs, getting 37 hitouts, 13 of them to advantage, and 22 touches, 13 of them being effective, 59.1% efficiency, that would equate to. 19 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 7 marks, 5 contested marks, 3 intercept marks. So one of them was a bit of both. 7 inside 50, 6 clearances are behind, 3 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, and 4 ground ball gets. Josh Dacos was a key distributor of half back, finishing with 28 disposals, 19 of them being effective, equating to 67.9% efficiency. 4 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 2 clearances, 6 score involvements, 10 pressure actions, 548 metres gained. And then underrated defender Reef McInnes did well, collected 12 disposals, 10 of them being effective, equating to 76.9% efficiency, 4 intercepts, 7 1%ers, and 7 spoils.
Yeah, considering I feel like this was sort of a Sam Wicks sort of situation, you know what I mean? Like, you raise your eyebrows about Reef McInnes playing defence, and it's sort of good because I don't think he was ever that threatening in the forward line, but you know what I mean? Like, again, of all the problems that Collingwood have, still finding, a good role for their, role players. And it's weird. Like, last year, I think I said that before. It's like sometimes I feel like their role players play a bit better than their overall core. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we have games where Darcy Moore doesn't look as good. I thought it was okay this game, but you know what I mean? But then maybe a player like Lipinski or Bo McCreary, Harvey Harrison last year, step up a bit and make him look a bit better than they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to mention about the players you mentioned, Josh Dacos, I feel like he got a bit of a hard knock because, when they were talking about Collingwood players not running two ways, they did put Josh Dacos a bit in the grill, but I feel like he was just playing like the role that Houston would play, off half back.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they're defending still okay-ish on the halfback line. As I said, I think you just got to give credit to Darcy Jones and Brett Daniels. You know what I mean? Like, I know a bit up the field they were lacking. So, I feel like it was a lot more. And I've said this before about Collingwood's midfield really letting their defensive side down. Like, it's just been of the last 2 years. And again, it's a bit concerning. It happened in round 0. Hopefully they'll patch it up. But, as I said, I think Josh Dacos, he's always a bit more forward to the ball anyway, but I thought it was fairly reasonable on the half-back line.
Yeah.
Like, they had to get something going. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like, if you their options for having a ball carrier of halfback were very limited at the time, especially without Houston.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we've seen Quaynor, like, he's a bit turnover prone. We'd like to see him lock down a bit more and, choose more, have more choice movement. And honestly, I don't know. Like, then what? You're looking at Steele side bottom, maybe? Like,
I don't think he has the pace that he used to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's like, if you're not having Josh Dacos have that role, like, that's your next best option. And
yeah, especially with Houston still out anyway. Like, your options are very limited right now.
Yeah, because Steele, like, I don't want to knock him too much because, he's been a good player for a long time, but his disposal has gone very much downhill over the last couple of years.
Mm.
He puts in effort still, but I wouldn't trust him. Like, he wouldn't be in my 2 to 3 year plan for ball movement. I think it's just worth, again, putting mileage into Dacos, Houston. Maybe at times, maybe Perriman goes back there if they choose to change up some of their midfield looks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could do that.
Yeah.
As for injuries, obviously the big one being Kieran Briggs went out early after a rough landing resulting in a neck injury. He'll be out for quite a while, unfortunately. It's gonna be rough for them in terms of the ruck front.
I'd say that's TBC, to be honest, because it really depends. He had a lot of concerning movements when he knocked down, because it did look like it was either neck or back. I actually think he may have been concussed as well. But you know what I mean? That was just, not nice to see.
No, especially when you have to get the stretcher involved. It's never pretty.
Mm.
And then potential hamstring concerns for Nick Dacos. And I only say this because whilst it did look like cramps, and he did get worked on in that third quarter, fourth cramps, and he did come back on in the fourth, he just couldn't run. It was just nothing his legs were giving him. And it looked like he was in a little bit more pain than he would have let on. So there could be some concerns for him, hamstring wise or calf wise. So might have to just keep an eye on that for during the week.
Everywhere, they were saying even hip movement, because he had a few hip issues in the preseason, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and I guess slightly you could also say Bobby Hill, because he struggled late in that match, but I'm pretty sure that was also just cramps. So just keep an eye out, especially if you have him in fantasy. He would have been. I think a lot of people are thankful that this isn't a serious round of Supercoach or fantasy, because a lot of people would have been putting Nick Dacos as captain, and he just got again a shutout initially, tagged by Bedford, who did a pretty fantastic job, and then just couldn't run.
It's it's not a good look, but hopefully he's all right. Well, for Collingwood fans, I hope he's all right.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, for the MRO, there were 3 players fined this week. John Newcomb was fined $6,250 for tripping James Rowbottom. I don't know which quarter this was. It did say in the report, but I didn't write it down. Again, it was apparently it was his 4th offense for tripping.
Tripping.
So
well, it's a pretty heavy fine, but I know I'm surprised actually, because they really clamped down on tripping. I thought if you did 4 times, you probably would have got a 1-gamer by now. Because I know old man Dustin, he used to like the good ankle tap.
Yeah, I remember the one from.
He's a bit too old to work it out of his
I remember the one that Butler.
Was that just the Dustin Martin rule?
I remember the one that Dan Butler did. Either it was last season or the season before, that got him in extreme hot water because it was a very, very obvious trip.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the times, it can be incidental contact, because some players are like that. You want to put an arm forward when a player's breaking away, but, logistically, you accidentally tap the foot. But, there was a lot of accidental trips. It was just something I noticed. And, as I said, I wasn't surprised that one of them ended up being a fine.
Yeah. Next is Lockie Ash, who was fined $3,750 for rough conduct against Scott Pendlebury. The rough conduct happens kind of all the time. It's always bound to be at least 1 during a week.
Yeah, I didn't actually see it, but I couldn't imagine roughing up Pendles. You know what I mean? It's so slippery. You'll just be afraid, he just steps back and you just fall forward or something.
Yeah.
He's a contact avoider, Pendlebury, and it's pretty wild, wily. So.
And then Toby Green, who looks to be getting back into the ranks of the most fined man in the AFL. He was fined twice this week. Once for careless contact with an umpire, which seems to happen all the time at this point. And then $6,250 for kneeing Reef McInnes, which I did see the footage for this, and it isn't as pretty as you would like to think. So it's a very fair fine in that regard.
Yeah, to me, that was fairly borderline. I didn't think it was going to get a week, but you know what I mean? It's geez. I think it was only a bit, you know, I don't know, I just didn't like to see it. But yeah, as I said, eh, not great to see him. You hope that it was just a bit of hothead, considering. But yeah, as I said, it is like one of the person you don't really want to encourage to get white line fever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when he's meant to be,
Yeah.
the captain.
Yeah. As I said, it's been better the last few years. Like, I won't say reformed or anything. Like, he still gets the occasional one, but yeah, as I said, you want him on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, 100%. And just for a bit of other news in regards to this specific week, Craig McRae was warned by the AFL about an interaction against an opposition player. I believe someone else it happened whilst that said player, I can't even remember what player it was coming off the bench. I think
I
he
think
just
that was Bedford.
might have been Bedford. I think he
Coming on onto
coming
the bench.
yeah, that's what I mean. He had just given away a free kick or something like that. I can't remember specifically what happened.
I think he drew a free kick and they weren't too happy about it.
Yeah. As Bedford was coming towards the bench, Fly had said something that someone else on the Giant side had picked up and called him out for it, telling him that he was better than that. And then
Oh,
obviously,
Kingsley. That was Kingsley.
oh yeah, that's right, it was Kingers. Oh, I get
Yeah, he gave them.
they both came from Richmond. They would know each other very well.
Yeah. Well, they were saying in the post match that, it was just a bit of banter, love. It's all good. Just a bit of the bands, but I reckon they may have been covering for each other a bit. I think Craig did say something, and it was probably a
I
bit
think there's a
longer
bit
than
of a
what he.
rivalry between them.
Yeah, like he said, "Oh, sit down, son," but the lips were moving a bit of a longer sentence, and I think Kingsley was just like, "Mate, sit down, don't, start this,"
Yeah.
and then make Craig, sort of just tailing between his legs, like, "Yeah, I probably shouldn't be doing that." And I
Um,
think, look, I don't mind them both sort of covering for each other. Like, I know Hinkley got a big fine, but you know what I mean? It's
that was
like,
also very much on camera and very obviously
A, it was
towards
on
players.
camera, B, it was more than one sentence. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like this was a situation where I think the AFL needed to say that, but also it at least got resolved on
Yeah.
its own sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And then just as another little tidbit, Laura Kane, the the GM of football. There we go. I got there eventually. Or the executive GM of football, I should say. She put out a memo towards players and clubs saying that if players will risk suspension if they continue to push rivals into contests. This is obviously equates to the Kieran Briggs issue that happened on the Sunday yesterday as we're recording this. The Sam Laylaw incident with Ruben Gibney back in the first practice match a couple of weeks ago. And there's been a couple of others since. Latham Vandermeer and Mitch Owens, obviously, were two players that also got involved in incidents such as this. She's just put it out there saying if players are very obviously still doing this in the next couple of weeks, fines and or suspensions will be handed out.
Yeah. But as mentioned, that was put out before this round, so I think they did say that, yeah, they actually cleared the Breaks incident. Like, they deemed that there wasn't enough there, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm imagining they're still going to play it a bit safe. I would imagine Gibney would have got done. Like, if that was,
Yeah, 100%.
if that, you know, was done in the regular. But, yeah, as I said, it'll be interesting. I feel like this is still like a few freaky-ish incidents, but you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like there's also been like a lot of pushes that just have been lucky not to result in a few of these. So again, I don't mind the crackdown. It'll just be interesting to see the adjudication of this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that does us for round 0. So let's jump over to our preview for round 1, the actual start of the AFL season, because
Round.
screw round 0, honestly. Starting with the traditional opening game of Richmond v Carlton, and that continues on to our last bit of other news, where Sam Laylaw, Luke Traynor, and Harry Armstrong, all three players signed in the 2024 draft, will make their AFL debuts on Thursday night, and I will be there to witness it.
Nice.
Am I
No,
expecting anything out of this? No, especially when we're paying $10.50 to win.
I'm not saying like, I think it's actually a lot better odds than that. And I'm not saying like Richmond are going to win. I wouldn't even say that they're much better than like 80-20, you know what I mean? But it is opening round and Carlton are missing a lot of players. And I think, especially with young kids, where I think everyone will be a bit less skillful. And we even saw it last year. Like Richmond in the early season, they weren't out of contest. Um, Obviously, I think there'll be a few moments where Carlton will, um, you know, put this down. I think there'll be phases where they'll get ahead. But honestly, I just think
I think we're going to be very similar to last season. Despite the injuries that we still have, I should say. I think we're going to be able to contend with some teams, but we're just going to be able to we're not going to be able to play our games for the most part, and we're not going to be able to maybe convert as frequently as we would like on the scoreboard.
Yeah, because we got to remember, like last year for the opening round, the score was 86-81. Yeah, Carlton were fairly inefficient with that, but you know what I mean. Like that was still wooden spoon Tigers, and a lot of games have been.
Well, at the time, it wasn't
relatively...
guaranteed wooden spoon Tigers.
No, they still had some alive players, but yeah, as I said, there's still, I would say, like an inkling that this might be one of the matches where Tigers show at least a bit of optimism. I reckon they can at least get some of their game going while it's still scrappy, while execution doesn't have to be perfect. Even though I think the Blues should easily get it done.
And if you're interested in the forecast, it's going to be at this point in time, it's meant to be a top of 23. So lower 15. So it's going to be a bit of a warm night still, but not too bad. It's not going to be super warm. Yeah, at the time.
Okay, yeah, that's not a bit.
So warm. Like it'll probably be about
like
maybe 18, 19 degrees at around 7:30 start of the game.
Yeah, I'm a West Australian, so I still think like 21, 22 is like good football weather, but yeah.
But yeah, overall,
I would want to play in 20.
Overall, definitely a safe bet to tip Carlton.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
But you want to hope for some positive signs out of Richmond's performance.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it'll be interesting to see the team sheets. And yeah, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, if you're gonna, if you like had to tip one long odds game every round, like I would say this one would be tempting, but yeah, I wouldn't want to blemish my perfect record by tipping Richmond.
Look, it is tempting, but it's not going to happen. All right, next
I said it's still 80-20, really.
Yeah. All right, next on our list is the Friday night match, also at the MCG. It's Hawthorn and Essendon. Well, we would have theoretically we would have seen probably a decent look at Essendon this week. Sorry, last week I should technically say. But obviously the Cyclone put a stop to that. So we don't entirely have the best look at what Essendon will show up against Hawthorn. But going off of Hawthorn's performance, we think they look pretty solid.
Yeah, well, I'm actually interested. I should look this up beforehand. I had only a short time in between coming home and recording this episode, but I think a few of the players playing the VFL, because obviously once they made the decision, Essendon didn't need to travel. Like their training and all that wouldn't have been affected. Unfortunately, the two Queensland teams would be a bit more disadvantaged by that. But I feel like they should have got some sort of run. Like they could have organised whatever.
Yeah, they might have done like an intra-club or something like that.
Yeah. So we're not too sure. Any Essendon fans that are listening, I know we got one. So leave a comment or something if you actually know. But I still feel like a whole game. It's sort of weird. Like I don't believe that I believe it takes somewhere between like 3 or 4 games to like get flow,
Mhm.
like in any given season. That's why I'm never too big in reading into the first 5 rounds. But I also think that I still think playing that earlier game is an advantage. Being round 0 for Hawthorn. And just in general, look, I'm going to say, like, I think in a given matchup, I think Hawthorn's going to beat Essendon. I will say the midfield battle is interesting. I think Essendon could get some dominance over Hawthorn's midfield.
Mhm.
And their forward line too. We'll see how that goes because that's not as forward dependent, and they're going to have to be because they don't have Peter Wright. I think he got injured sometime during the week. I think he's in doubt for round 1. So, maybe they'll look for some small ball vulnerability, especially when they did look so good in that preseason match against Geelong.
Mhm.
And I think maybe they'll look to target that. But yeah, I can't really see Essendon's defense doing anything. I know that Hawthorn's forward line wasn't that. I don't know. The more I'm talking about it, the more I think Essendon's not too bad in this. But yeah, I'm still going to pick Hawthorn.
Yeah, I'm definitely going Hawthorn. I mean, granted, I'd probably go Hawthorn anyway, just because I like the look of them a lot better. I just like the team a lot better.
Yeah.
I think Hawthorn just overall, I think, are better structured than Essendon. Essendon are still trying to find their exact footing.
Oh yeah.
One especially defensively. Although I think they've done very well in finalizing how their defense is going to look. It's their forward line. I do have a bigger concern with, especially
Yeah.
no more
Definitely.
Stringer. That's who was their main avenue for goals last season, and a couple of seasons prior. They're now relying on Langford a lot more, and some of their midfields push up a lot more as well. So that still remains to be
Yeah.
seen how that performs in an actual season match. So yeah, I think Hawthorn is probably the safer option if you're tipping this season.
Yeah. But I think it's just like optimism, to think Essendon's got a bit of a chance. But like, I definitely see areas where they're, possibly could curve. Like Hawthorn again, they're so hard because, as I said, while their outside makes up for a lot of their flaws and all that sort of thing, like, you still have to say, like, they are. It's harsh to say flawed because they're a young team doing very well.
Yeah.
But there's, like, realistically, like, as I said, like, a forward line of Chol, even Ginnivan Watson, like, I'm still saying that that's not going to be. You wouldn't pick Hawthorn's forward line if you're lining up all 18 teams. Like, it would be what? Maybe, I reckon 9 or 10th. You know what I mean? Like, you'll get away with it by having a good midfield, but you know what I mean? Like, on paper, you're not picking it. I don't know. It's hard to say.
It is hard to
I haven't
say.
ranked them all, but I'll yeah. There's others I'd pick ahead of it. Is all I'm saying, but not Essendon's.
No,
Essendon's
I think
stay
Hawthorn are
away
pretty
from.
safe here. All right, let's jump
Yeah.
over to Saturday's games with Geelong and Fremantle at Goomba Stadium. And as history has told us, Fremantle love to surprise Geelong each time they go over there.
Yeah, it's going to be weird, especially again as a freshy opening match since Geelong didn't play last week. Again, probably could have organised some training, but I know Freo boys. Also, a few of them had a run in the WAF. No, sorry, no, they didn't. WAF isn't running this week. Maybe the VFL isn't running this week. Who knows?
I don't know. I
Um,
haven't looked.
Anyway, so Geelong again. It's sort of weird. I think generally, I think it's really hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, it is
Because
because they
Freo
match up with
have
each other really really well now.
yeah. Also, like, they don't nullify anything from each other. Like, the biggest thing you might say is, like, Alex Pearce could shut down Jeremy Cameron. Uh, but that's about it. You know what I mean? Like, Geelong don't need a lot of possessions and, tend to give other teams and Fremantle arguably overpossess the ball or run a possession-heavy game style.
Mm-hmm.
So both teams probably play a bit of their natural game. Geelong, again, can get the ball out the centre pretty easily. Freo lack a bit in that. So, yeah, honestly, I reckon this is literally just a game of whoever gets their game going. And in this early seasons, it's very much up to luck and conditioning that we don't have access to, who will determine that. So, yeah, I think this is just a really just go off gut feel. You know what I mean? Just pick the one you like more.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because we don't know at the time any like major ins and outs either. Like we know for Geelong they have a very,
Yeah.
very minuscule injury list.
Yeah,
Fremantle
exactly.
a little bit more so,
Too bad.
but they're still holding in good stead.
Mm.
So yeah, I think who knows, someone like Alex Pearce could actually be the difference maker in that defense.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, as I said, I still reckon Geelong might. Again, they like scoring out the centre. Freo might take a bit, especially since Hayden Young. That will be one of the bigger ones
Mm-hmm.
that's missing. So yeah, that might provide a bit of an avenue for Geelong to get some of their ball movement going. Because we've seen that defensively, Fremantle outside their best three of Brayshaw, Sarong, and Young sometimes can be a bit vulnerable defensively. So playing a whole match like that might tip the scales to Geelong. So that's for that reason, and it's a very slim, arbitrary reason. I'll probably tip the Cats.
Yeah, yeah, that's very valid. I'm probably leaning towards Geelong just at this point in time. But you know, being Fremantle again, they love to surprise Geelong down in Geelong. So
Yeah,
there could be a last minute swap. It's a wait and see.
yeah,
All right, next on the list is Sydney and Brisbane at the SCG. Now we've seen Sydney. We know what they look like. They're, as we just spoke about, we're not super high on them at the moment. Although they do have some good signs. They have a lot of good pieces still. But Brisbane, the reigning premiers, as they didn't get to play last week, you know, to open the season, we don't entirely know what they look like apart from the community match game that they played. Technically last week, but like a week and a bit ago. So that's kind of all we have to go off of. And from what they look like
yeah,
then, they looked really good. They didn't look like the loss of Danaher really affected them all that much. But there's definitely some parts where this grand final rematch could go the opposite direction.
yeah. And look, the biggest obvious thing is, and I mentioned a bit in the pre-match, like they look good, but they weren't going at 100%. You know what I mean? And the problem with that is, again, maybe you do that because you're playing in the opening round, but then that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? So you're probably not going to have trained. You know, I don't even know if they have training. Maybe they go to Sydney early to try and schedule a training. You know what I mean? Like, that's still up in the air. I don't know exactly,
Yeah, I
you
don't
know,
entirely know
what
how
the
they're doing things.
extent of how, you know, the ex-Hurricane, got to use its
Cyclone.
like ex-Cyclone. That's what I meant. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's just one of those things where, like, tipping Sydney wouldn't be too out of the ordinary, but it's very tough to do it after the last match there. Your gut still says to tip Brisbane, but you know what I mean? It's like, you just shrug your shoulders if they looked a bit off the pace, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can definitely put that down to lack of preparation due to said cyclone, especially because we don't even know
Yeah.
if they're even able to get out of Brisbane at this point in time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a lot of logistics still to happen. Like, you know, it's as much as, you know, the AFL did the right thing and all that, there's still like a lot of hard work, and hopefully, you know, open communications, they'll try and get the best out of what's available and what can be done. But, you know, as I said, it's still a lot of bigger than life thing, you know, like, you know, as we said, like a lot of friends are just receiving power now. So we'll wait to see. But yeah, as I said, I'm still tipping Brisbane just out of pure respect. But I'm not banking on that tip being correct. Like, again, it's really just whether it's affected them or not. Because I
Yeah,
think head to head, I like Brisbane a lot better, especially with Sydney's defense being a bit suspect, maybe.
yeah, I agree. All right, next on the list is the Bulldogs and North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. As we saw from the Bulldogs in their community match, they looked really good, but they did also lose the Bont, and he'll be out for a while, so he won't play this match. Which requires them
They lost
again.
a lot.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
they did lose a lot. That's true. But that'll require
Right.
their midfield balls to step up. It'll require their forward line to step
Yeah.
up. Who knows? We might get to see the insane performance from Liver that he had during that match once more, especially against North. It's
Yeah.
definitely doable. But although
Again.
that's not discredit North. I think they've definitely improved a lot with their off-season pickups. I thought they looked good during their community match, despite the scoreline that it was. Because they were playing what? They were playing North West Coast.
West Coast.
Yeah, so it was again.
Well, they did play North in an
Oh
entry
yeah,
final.
they played
So.
themselves. They always play themselves.
Yeah.
It's not to not discredit them. They look better. But against the team that is a viable top 8 team, that remains to be seen how that compares.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, again, you wouldn't be surprised if it's close, but you wouldn't also be surprised if Western Bulldogs just flog them. Because again, we mentioned this in a lot of our analysis. When Western Bulldogs have the pieces together, they do have the capability to just steamroll teams.
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned last year, North Melbourne did get steamrolled as much as they did have a few good performances. So, yeah, as you mentioned, I think the midfield battle will be important. I think North really have got to try to get a lot of consistency, try and make sure that their ball winning efforts in the middle converts to at least decent forward entries and having that ball stick.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you have a team like the Bulldogs who aren't as threatening from the back half, I think for North it will just be win as much as you can, and hopefully you'll convert enough to where you'll be competitive. And if you can get that forward game going, defense for them, it's not going to be their strong point. Even with a neutered Western Bulldogs forward line with injury, I think, they'll still find ways. Pressure by numbers. And I don't think North will have the midfield bulk to try and, outmuscle the Bulldogs in the middle. I think it's more just when they do get their opportunities, if they can convert a bit, play better. We know the Western Bulldogs aren't an accurate team. They do struggle with efficiency. So I think really it's just if I'm, triple time Premiership Alistair Clarkson, I'm really just focusing on North game. I won't worry too much about how the Western Bulldogs play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back in your forward half and just test your mettle sort of real thing.
Yeah, for them, it's just all about improvement. It's not necessarily about winning games as much as winning games is always ideal. It's just about improvement.
Yeah. I think it is about winning games, but I don't think the Western Bulldogs is a necessarily opponent you need to be beating, but if they believe in themselves. I'm not going to
anything
reduce
is possible
AFL
with
into...
enough belief.
Yeah, I don't mean to be that reductionist, but for a team like North, young again, opening round against a bad converter, you gotta. Those are that's why you gas up your players, because this could be a match where they show something. But again, tipping Bulldogs maybe just a bit better odds than Richmond. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
yeah.
I mean, on paper, it's currently better odds, but
yeah, I wouldn't say it's by that much, but
anyway,
it's feasible.
Let's jump to our last Saturday match, being against Collingwood and Port Adelaide at the MCG.
Yeah, I will disappointingly be missing this. I will be at a rock concert. Look out at Whitford's on the coast. I'll be enjoying a set. I think Jebediah is playing around that time, so at least I'll be missing it for a band I like. But yeah, in terms of the matchup, it's going to be fairly interesting. Obviously, Collingwood did dominate Port last year in their one matchup. Sort of out the blue, it's not out the blue, but sort of a game where their forward line deficiencies were counteracted by the speed and class of Bobby Hill, basically.
Yeah.
Or to be less reductionist, some of the one-on-one matchups. But it'll be interesting because Port, their defense looked a bit better in the preseason, especially with Finlayson down there. It's gone a lot more simple. I still think it will be like high intercept generation, but you know what I mean? Like they looked a bit more controlled, and I think if they can reduce the avenue of Collingwood to slingshot, because Port did get a lot of inside 50s in that game, they did have comparable stats. It's just they were conceding a lot from turnover. So, hey, I think early season I might edge towards. I mean, I'm obviously going to tip Port anyway, but like legitimately, I think Port have more chance of winning this just because it's so early in the season. Just because Collingwood, I think it will take more than 1 week to solve some of their problems that they had last week.
Yeah.
But I do expect this to be a more reasonable contest. Because as I said, don't be too fooled by Collingwood. They're not that far off the mark. But you know what I mean? It's one of those things where them being off the mark exposes all areas of the ground.
Yeah, it does.
Whereas Port, they get away with being a bit flimsy because, you know, A, their midfield's so dominant, and B, their backline still, on paper, defends fairly well in most natural contests. It's mainly just turnovers and some stoppage work where they get a bit dinged up. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm leaning towards Port in this case probably as well. Again, I'm not entirely impressed with what we've seen from Collingwood so far, especially against GWS. And they definitely have. It'll definitely take more than a couple of weeks to sort out what are the issues that they currently have. So I'm leaning towards Port. Granted, we've only seen Port from their community match, and again, they looked good, but it wasn't the best sort of performance that you want to see out of Port. So we know that they can step it up another level.
They dominated St Kilda.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean? Like
St
St Kilda
Kilda.
was so, yeah, they were pretty inept that match.
Yeah.
Talking about who we're going to be talking about next.
Yeah, may as well jump over to it
Yeah, I think,
now.
yeah, as I said, they'll be looking to improve in a lot of areas.
Yeah,
To come back from
first
that.
first Sunday match over at the Adelaide Oval. So the Adelaide Crows versus St Kilda, and yeah, as we're saying, like you want to hope that St Kilda have improved after them just getting absolutely flattened by Port.
Yeah, and it's sort of going to be strange this game because last year this game was an absolute stinker, admittedly in wet conditions. But St Kilda were on a good run and then sort of just let Adelaide roll over them to, you know, sort of just look mediocre again. But this will be interesting because, again, both teams had issues with their midfield last year. And again, when they matched up, it didn't inspire. I know, again, tough conditions, but, you know, so I think for St Kilda, it might be actually a good game to get their defense going, especially since it did look so bad in the preseason matchups. Their forward line, as I said, that's sort of a wait and see thing. I don't think it will be possible to really predict how they're going to function because it's going to have to come out of left field. Or maybe not that. Maybe, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how much of the later season success St Kilda had with their forward ball structure.
Yeah.
And how that will influence the start of this season. But yeah, on paper, I think they've really got to expose Adelaide on the ground because Dolls, Adelaide's got them covered. Like, they were really solid against defending your standard stock entries. Again, we're talking about players like Worrell, Keane, even, you know, general defenders like Max Marcolani, you know, all very solid. So, you know, yeah, like if they can bring the ball to ground and they focus on that, and that's something that they, you know, look to do, because that definitely didn't happen in the preseason. Like, I could see a scenario where St Kilda get in it, but yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards Adelaide more time than not.
Yeah, 100%.
Especially away, especially early in the season. You know, yeah, as I said, the only way I see him being exposed is if, you know, they make a few too many defensive errors. You know, because the forward line should take care of St Kilda.
Yeah, Adelaide's forward line should honestly just completely stomp them, to be honest. I mean, I like St Kilda's back line, but it's since the loss of Battle, it's not the greatest right now.
Yeah, well, it's going to expose Toll lineups, and they do have players that do, like I think it's touch and go whether Taru plays apparently round one, and it's still a bit iffy considering he didn't have that preseason.
Yeah.
Um, so so you're looking at Wilkie and who's the other one? I'm blanking. The former Bulldogs player. It's not Cordy, is it?
Oh,
I think it is
McRae.
Cordy. Zane Cordy. Zane Cordy.
Oh yeah, Zancordi's in the back line. McRae's up
I'm
forward,
talking
isn't he?
about Toll.
Yeah,
Toll
yeah, yeah,
defender.
yeah. Sorry,
So
I
like
forgot. I
that's
forgot
all
that
they've
Cordy
got.
originally came from the Dogs as well.
Yeah, sorry. So what I'm talking about is they've only really got two defenders for Phil Thorpe, Fogarty, and the Texan if
Yeah.
he's playing. Uh
Well,
I think he's
it's a home
playing.
game, so he should be playing, but I don't know if he's injured.
Yeah, I know he didn't play the last community series, but I think that was more just he didn't need to. So yeah. Or maybe he had reduced minutes. Anyway, doesn't matter. Either way. Yeah, for that reason I'm tipping Adelaide.
Yeah, 100%. All right, next on the list is our last game at the MCG for the round, and that's Melbourne and the GWS Giants. And I think this is going to be a tough
Grindhouse.
matchup.
Yeah. If you hate free flowing football, if you like a mud fort battle, maybe not in literal mud, MCG has a roof so you can close it, but
Oh no, actually,
uh,
MCG does not have the roof.
no, it doesn't have. I'm
You're
thinking
thinking
of
of
idiot.
Marvel.
It's not going to rain. Or
No,
maybe I don't know. I'm
forecast
not
says
a
it
weatherman.
shouldn't, but still a week away.
But I couldn't think of a more defensive
Actually,
matchup to have in the first.
77% chance of rain, so it might.
Oh, but yeah, this is your grit and grind game, and I know Melbourne might not be up to snuff, but I really think that this matchup between GWS is probably going to favour them a bit more, like especially for an opening game. I don't think Melbourne will mind this too much. Again, I wouldn't be tipping them outright, but it's smoky, and
Mm.
it's not like both teams would have issue with tolls. And again, if it rains, like both teams having good ground ball work. Melbourne getting Alex Neil-Bullen, having a few players like Chandler, and I'm probably forgetting someone. Oh, Sparrow.
Yes, that's right.
Um, you know,
Sparrow fits in there.
yeah, they're not better than what Jones and Darcy Wilson looked like. Darcy Wilson?
Darcy
Darcy Jones
Jones.
and Brent Daniels. Brent Daniels. But, it's not as woeful. Like, it's better than their pretty vanilla forward lines. So,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just, who wins the grind, who converts more efficiently. Melbourne's going to make it tough for GWS to score, especially even if they get Hogan and Stringer back. I think that's just a tough matchup for them. I don't think that's going to affect things too much. It's just,
Yeah, I think Melbourne's backline is what's gonna probably be the difference maker
yeah.
here because, well, especially if they don't have Hogan or Stringer, Lever and May are just gonna have a field day in their backline.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of offense generating, then yeah, like I think if Hogan and Stringer come, they would like be generally responsible. But yeah, as I said, I can definitely see them in more offense going from their backline if those two were missing. But yeah, I don't know. It's still a lot to ask, and GWS did play so well defensively, so it's equally going to be as hard for Melbourne to score. But I think Melbourne has a good chance if this is like a real low scoring game, like a 6-10, 7 something game.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, I'm still probably backing G Dubs. I just think this is a closer to 50-50 game than you think.
Yeah, I'm currently backing the Giants on this one. I do want to wait and see just to kind of have an idea of like who's going to play, especially for
Yeah.
that ruck position for the Giants. It'll probably be O'Keefe, but we will see what happens
But
in that
we
regard.
saw Gorn absolutely swallow some B tier ruckman in the practice matches, so
We did.
that is a big advantage for Melbourne.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like the battle's gonna be won for this game in two places. It's gonna be one either in the ruck with Max Gorn just having free reign, or it's gonna be one in Melbourne's defense with Lever and
Yeah.
May, provided Stringer and Hogan don't play.
Yeah.
But then again, Cadman has come into his own much more recently, and he's a lot stronger in terms of being able to deal with those two players. So there could be a
Yeah.
big shift as well there.
Because it's not like, I said he had a bit of a game last match, but he was still presenting okay. He was just dropping marks, and
Yeah.
sometimes that just takes a round as a toll, especially young, so...
Yeah, again, former number 1 draft pick, but he's still taken a couple of years to really develop into the role that he's meant to play.
He's still a key forward. They take a while.
Yeah. All tall players take a while. That's a known fact. That's why Ruckman take one of the longest positions to fill.
Yeah.
Um,
Unless you're Darcy Jones.
Yes. But Darcy Jones or Darcy Cameron?
Sam Darcy.
Now
I'm really getting confused.
Too many Darcys.
Yeah, well, that's a bit of a ironic tall pick. I wouldn't pick him in a giant contest.
No. Anyway, last game of the round, and it's the traditional. Well, it's not the traditional round 1 clash, but a traditional coast to coast clash between the West Coast Eagles and the Gold Coast Suns.
Now, this, despite not being a good match, is interesting. Gold Coast, terrible away last year.
Mm-hmm.
Booked to improve by the pundits. Not us, but,
We'd like
the
to see
other
some
pundits.
improvement, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah, we would, but, geez. I'm not big on, teams have to win this for, pride or exact, but, it's looking a bit grim if they lose this. It really would start to feel like all bears repeating.
Yeah.
Because Gold Coast, their midfield should dominate. This is West Coast, without Yo, maybe Elijah Hewitt, maybe not Elijah Hewitt, but they really should get spanked in the middle by Gold Coast.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'll be no excuses there. So it'll be how much their defense gets exposed. What I should say is Gold Coast only need serviceable forward entries, or they should, to win this, and they should comfortably win this. But they're mucking around, it's gonna be a bit eyebrow raising. And I think, as we've seen with West Coast, their forward line, it's decent enough.
It is.
It just needs a bit more supply. And as I said, they've got a few players to round out. Obviously, we're talking about Baker, we're talking about Graham, who should actually help in that midfield, without Yo. Still, I wouldn't say enough to, want me to think that West Coast would win the clearance battle or whatever, but it should at least make some of Gold Coast. They should put pressure on Gold Coast entries, and that's where they struggle. But yeah, as I said, you really got to think Gold Coast should take care of this, surely.
You'd think so. You'd want to hope so. Especially when, the loss of Barras did take a huge chunk out of West Coast defense.
Yeah, exactly. It's just... And, Gold Coast, they love generating intercepts as well. And West Coast, they do cough up the ball a bit. So, that's another area where, those turnovers that expose that one-on-one matchups, they should get that look. So, this might be, even if they don't get the midfield game going, that's their backup plan for scoring.
Yeah.
So, if they are resulting in that, I can see a scenario where West Coast win. They can't just rely on the turnover. I mean, it's West Coast, they can, but you know what I mean? That opens the door to what should be a game they should shut, so...
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, we're both going the Suns at the moment.
Yeah.
But I could be swayed to go West Coast, honestly.
I don't think I could be. I just don't trust the Suns. Yeah, I'm sorry, Suns fans. I really want you to improve. I really need to see the first 6 or 7 games this season, just to see if some of the stats and some of the team outline looks a bit different.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that will do us for our round 1 predictions. So last on the agenda for the week, we have a little bit of graphs that we want to take a gander at. Essentially, this is about all of the Premiership teams from the past 20 years and how they were structured, how they were built across the years that players were recruited, etc., etc. You
Yeah,
found
I
this,
thought,
so I'll let you run through it.
round one or round zero, I should say, all the spotlight tends to be on like players that are just brought in. Teams are hopeful that they'll like fill in the holes, but if you're a team that's only like done a little bit, like I think this is just a good reminder that a lot of these things build off such minor things going in. Like I don't think there's a single graph that's like all of the last 5 years. So, just it's just, I think premierships are built of good 10-year list building, and this is a very good graphic to sort of show that. And yeah, we'll start with Brisbane.
Yeah, so this is the
And
2024 Premiership team, last year's Premiership team that I have first up
mm,
on this graphic. And it shows which players were recruited and what year they were recruited, and also the players that were picked up from trades or slash transfers slash delistings from other teams, etc., etc. And it's pretty surprising how many players they actually found through the draft.
and especially when you consider like, well, not especially, but they're an interesting team, but they're probably one of the better ones at getting players over. You know what I mean? Like, I think, like, of all the East Coast teams, Sydney and Brisbane are probably a notch above um, Gold Coast, GWS.
The
Um,
Adelaide teams and the WA teams.
Port's been all right. Adelaide's been okay. I think like East Coast, because if you're gonna go to the East Coast, you've probably got that more of that draw to just go to Melbourne. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, I
Well,
think
as a
I,
tourist who has been to Brisbane a lot more frequently in the past couple of years, I can definitely see why like Brisbane would be much more of a kind of an echelon
hmm,
above a lot of the other team destinations.
okay.
So,
Sydney reeling at this comment because
but
that's pretty
as a
much directly
Victorian,
talking
I
to them.
hate New South Wales, so
Yeah,
that settles it right there.
yeah. But anyway, just going through these players. We won't go through every player in every line, but like what's interesting to see is you've got that good core of new players, and then players in. It doesn't have to be hits in every draft pick, but you've got to have some people to provide that experience. So
Mhm.
obviously you got Leicester. That was the earliest pick for Brisbane. Then you got their core of like Zorko, Andrews. Amazingly, Hipwood was before people like McCluggage, Rayner, Starcevic. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
Rayner was the number one draft
in my
pick in that
mind,
year,
Hipwood's
which is
still developing.
crazy to
You
think
know,
about.
it's yeah. But you know what I mean. So you got all a solid chunk. And you'll see that with a lot of them. Like a solid chunk is in that. Maybe 6 or 7 years before the premiership.
Hmm.
And then, it's about having enough experience before and a few players in like the last 2 or 3 draft picks. So
One player
as we can
I
see,
want to highlight that they say that was selected in the draft is Connor McKenna, because he originally played for Essendon and then he retired out of the game to go back to Ireland and then came back through the draft.
rookie draft.
Yeah, I know, but still, it's a player worth mentioning because it means that because it was a he was a player that Brisbane already had their eye on before he came back to the
Yeah.
AFL. It was just there's an offer,
Yeah, it's just one of those
come back to
things
the
where,
AFL, and now he's a Premiership player.
yeah. But you know what I mean? I think that's still just good list building though. Like it is fair pointing that out. But
Yeah,
yeah, as I said, you can see a lot of design in this. And we should go to the next one because we can't spend too long. Where this one's like one of the more different, and you can see sort of the difference between the Victorian ones and some of the Melbourne-based ones. And this one stretches.
the Collingwood one. Yeah.
Yeah, Scott
Oh,
Pendlebury, what an old fart.
well,
2006.
this is what his. If I do my math correctly, this was his like 18th season, no 17th season, something like that. 19th
Oh, this
season.
is the 17th season.
Yeah.
This would have been 15th when the graphic was made.
Oh, yeah. Because it's the 2023 Premiership.
Yeah,
It's the
2023
mark.
Premiership.
Yeah, so
Um, so as
that's
we
crazy.
Yeah. So as we can see, and as you mentioned, when you look at their draft, Oleg Markov,
No, actually,
again,
this is
rookie
his
draft.
19th season. Wait, did he debut in
Uh,
2006 or was he just drafted in 2006?
he debuted. Like, it took a couple of years to get going, but it was pretty fast.
No, yeah, 2025 would be his 19th season.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, that would make sense because six is one more than five.
yes, correct. That is
So,
basic math.
yes, yes,
But yeah, the
yes.
fact of the matter is,
Uh,
he is the oldest player in the AFL right now, and it's crazy.
yeah. But in terms of this, you can see what I mean. Like, they still had that good draft pick. But yeah, they're definitely a team that can definitely go a bit more to the trade and transfer. Obviously, you got Cripps Howe, Hoskin Elliott, Darcy Cameron, Pat Lipinski, Billy Frampton, Bobby Hill, and Tom Mitchell. Most of which were fairly important, you know,
Tom
to the
Mitchell,
role.
former, Brownlow winner.
Yeah. Not one bad to pick up. Yeah, as I said, it's just strange, Sort of discarded by two clubs, really. Sort of proved his worth, Hawthorn after Sydney, proving that he should be a full-time player, and then proving himself at Collingwood that he had a bit more in the tank.
Yeah,
Dropped off a bit now, but I'm still glad that he was able to get that premiership.
yeah, absolutely. And then obviously, another player I want to highlight in this case is Oleg Markov. Originated from Richmond, went up to the Gold Coast Suns, retired.
Mm.
I wouldn't say retired, but he was delisted. But Fly then took over for Collingwood, who had coached him under Richmond, and was like, I think you've still got what it takes. You want to come over, give us a
Yeah.
try. So he did, and became a 2023 Premiership player.
Yeah. And it's funny to see because, when you think about 2021, which is, you know, um, okay, yeah. So, they get Nick Dacos, which is obviously a really big boon, but like 2021, they were bottom four, weren't they? Or was that
Yeah, they were
2020?
pretty low. That was the end of the
I'm pretty sure
end
they
of the
were
Buckley
bottom
era.
four. Well, they were sort of like an Adelaide bottom four, where they were like
They
okay-ish,
were
but a
contenders, but
bit
not
separated
like
from the
massive
contenders.
contenders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but yeah, as I said, and then that changed quickly, and as you can see, like I think again, just that their relentlessness of bringing players in, you have to respect it a tiny bit, because that's look. I mean, you hate to see it like Collingwood just going out and getting players, but for them it works, and you can sort of see how they've been able to be at least decent for most parts of the last couple of decades.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So next we'll kind of just go over the teams that have won over like the past 4 years, and then for the Richmond, the ones that won individually over the past 4 years. So
Yeah,
next will be this
Geelong,
team, whichever the hell it is. I can't remember.
Geelong,
Geelong, that's right, and
Geelong.
then Melbourne as well. So
Yeah,
as we can see in Geelong's, like a lot of their wins came from their veteran core. And then
mm,
they had a bunch of strong recruiting in the draft from about
mm,
2014, 2015 ish. And like the secondary core, quote unquote secondary
mm.
core, and by that meaning like Stanley, Dangerfield, Zach Tui, Gary Rowan, all came from trades from other teams.
Yeah, and it's always, like, Geelong is a team that's, oh, they buy players, but like again, a lot of these players in the grey, like a lot of them are very end of their career thing. The only one arguably getting in their prime was Zach Tui and Patrick Dangerfield.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry, both in their prime and playing well, because obviously Reece
Yes.
Stanley was probably, but he was sort of discarded by St Kilda. Arguably Zach Tui too, but Carlton were really
Carlton
dumb
were
by
going
having to
through a
go.
lot of issues back then.
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? So, they took a fair few risks with a lot of these players. So, they backed themselves in, plus drafted really well. And it's a good smattering, like they wouldn't have had the best draft picks during this period, but at least every year with, being in the low sort of draft pick area, they picked one or few players. And that's what we need to see is like, if you can get one or two players every draft, even if you're a contender, that's why I don't necessarily believe in tanking because you only need a few. And over time, that just builds up into consistency. And that's where you have a team that doesn't just crap the bed. every now and
I didn't
again.
realize that Tom Stewart was so young.
Tom
Recruited,
Stewart,
yeah. He was
yeah.
recruited in the same year as Mark O'Connor, Zach Guthrie, Jack Henry, Tom, and Brendan Parfitt. That's
Yeah. I think on the flip side, Jack Henry and Zach Guthrie are older than you think
oh yeah, I
as
know, but
well.
like the
Yeah.
fact that
Oh,
they were
Parfitt's only
all
24.
drafted in the same year
Yeah.
is crazy.
I think Parfitt's, yeah, dropped out, gone to VFL, but he's only 24. That's why I'm not surprised if he comes back. But yeah, Tom Stewart, I think he's 25, 26. I think he's actually a bit older, because he obviously wasn't recruited at 19.
Yeah.
So I think it's only a couple of years. So I think he's 27, but I'm not entirely sure.
And then we'll jump over to Melbourne in the 2021 Premiership. The Premiership played over in Perth. And
Yeah,
you can see here, like a lot of their players were drafted in the same years.
yeah, well, this is sort of the thing. It's like, again, Melbourne's the opposite. You see a team building from where they did have a lot of first round selections. Um, but still, the bulk of it was more recent because obviously, with a bad system, only the really cream players
Yeah.
stuck around. For every James Arm and Chris Salem, I think it was a bit before. I think 2000 and was it 10 or 9 that was Jack Watson, Jack Tengrove.
That
I
was
can't remember.
it was like 29,
My,
2010, that sort of area. Or
yeah,
yeah, it
one
would
of
have
them
been
would have been
sorry, 29
Ali.
sorry, 2009, 2008, that sort of era.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. There's just a lot of drop offs, and as you can see, it did take a lot to get that core to go, but it still took a lot of smart recruiting and shoring up with some good drafting because it can't just be banking for that good run of players.
Yeah.
Because they had Petrarca in 2016, 2017 playing lights out, Alex Neil Bullen being very serviceable, Angus Brayshaw, Clayton Oliver playing very well, but they never seemed all that threatening in those years. It wasn't until 2020. And, they had that year where they went pretty well, but then dropped back into the bottom four. That was the year, obviously, that they got, what was it? Luke Jackson, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that was like 2018, 2019 sort of
So
area.
2017 was the season they got bottom four, and they picked up Jackson. So, yeah, as you can see, it takes a while to build a list, and
you look at the list,
as I said,
and you look at these players, and majority of them are still playing, still on their playing list. James Harms went over to the Doggies. Alex Neil Bullen obviously went over to Adelaide this off season. Luke Jackson is now over at Freo. Ben Brown retired. But everyone else is still. Oh, and Angus Brayshaw, obviously, very sad. In his case, but everyone else, as far as I'm aware, I don't know about. Is McDonald still playing? Is that the one at Sydney?
Tom McDonald, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, everyone else still playing and still vying for Melbourne to become Premiership contenders again.
Yeah. Even in the recruits, they've only lost one from that. Oh, sorry, two from that lot.
Oh yeah,
Michael
Hibbert. I forgot about Michael Hibbert. Yeah.
Gone, but, yeah. So.
And the fact that their core defensive group came from trades in Lever and May is that's crazy for them, and the fact that they've still both held in good stead.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, geez, that's some value right there. Like I know that they knew they were getting a really good player in May, and it was a shame to see him leave the Suns, but Lever was still, it was just nice to get him. Like he wasn't he's gonna he wasn't as hype as the Barris trade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
All right, I'm gonna quickly just go through the Richmond ones because actually no, we might skip that for now and just go to West Coast in 2018 because this is a little bit more interesting. I feel.
Yeah, because again, we're talking about a WA team. Again, you're getting less free agency. Obviously, there's still a bit. And a big part of that was the go home 5 for Brisbane in terms of Elliot Yeo, Jack Redden, and Jamie Cripps. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I think Cripps
so,
is the heavyweight boy.
Well, they're not all go home 5, but you know what I mean. They all came from Brisbane.
Yeah.
Yes. So the more interesting thing is like, again, and you look at how different that their recruiting has been, comparatively, is where they nailed key players, and they sort of relied that for a lot of their success because, again, a lot of their things have been getting years out of Shannon Hearn,
Mm-hmm.
Schofield, even Maston. I know he caught a bit of flack, but McGovern, Lysette, Darling, they really got a lot out of their well, not high drafted, but their key forwards, and then everything else is sort of filling in the gaps. You know what I mean? Like, you have some quality players drafting, obviously, like Liam Ryan, Willie Rioli, Liam Duggan. But you know what I mean? Like, West Coast's go-to has been get the big players and then surround them with talent.
Yeah, and
And,
Slaughter.
it's one of those things that's served them well so long, but, they're going to have it. It's a much different look now. Now, you know what I mean? Like, they've got Oscar Allen. They tried with a few other players, obviously Brandner being a bit of a bust, that sort of happened. Waterman was looking a bit iffy for a while, but seems and hopefully will still come good from his brilliant last year. But you know what I mean? It's they took a bit off surrounding some of these old players, and you can see why the drop off happened so quickly after the Premiership. Because once that 2010 call went, it definitely exposed some lighter drafting over
Yeah,
the last few
and the
years.
only ones, and the only one out of that core is that's still there is McGovern, who's barely hanging on for dear life at this
Mm.
point.
Oh, yeah, too. But
Oh
again, for
yeah,
the start of the season, is not there. So I know what you mean. Yeah, exactly. And even the last 4 years, it's only Ryan and Cole from 4 years before their premiership that is still there. Venables being unfortunately injured and Rioli being traded out. So
mm-hmm.
Vardy, Jetta, Redden all gone. So you can see where a drop off can come from a premiership. So
Yeah, and it's
I
just
thought that was really
unfortunate that
interesting.
throughout the massive amounts of injuries that they had during the COVID era, as
Yeah.
well as all the other retirees and trades, people that all the players wanted to get out of Perth or just wanted to leave the AFL entirely. It really hurt West Coast in terms of their attempted rebuild.
Didn't really lose that many players. I can't really name
No,
that
but it's
many
like
that were.
it's not just in those 2 years though, because it's the continuation onto
Yeah.
2023, and 2024 as well. So it's like it's just that span of
Yeah, I
5 years
guess.
that like really
Yeah.
hurt them the most.
Yeah, for sure. As I said, you can see how recruiting, even when you're successful, can be so important because that turns a one-off premiership into not even a dynasty, but like a 5-year competitive powerhouse sort of team.
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to the Richmond. Richmond. I was gonna say three-peat. It's not a three-peat. The Richmond three
Mm.
premiership gap of 17 to 20. I need to know which one. This is the 2017 one that I've got up first, and as you can see, pretty much majority of the players came from the draft. Basher Hooley being one,
Mm.
he was probably an outlier because he originally started at Essendon, and Essendon dropped him. So that's how we picked him up. I think we picked him up in the rookie draft, but everyone else, for the most part, all came together. Like it kind of in pairs, really. So obviously,
Mm.
starting with Jack Rowell and Shane Edwards, we've known for a long history that they were recruited together. They've always been like very close friends. Cochin and Rance, I didn't realize that Rance was actually um, drafted the same year as Cochin. Didn't know that,
Mm.
but there you go. Granted, France only played in one of the three premierships, got an ACL, and then retired. Very tragic, but is what it is for him. Dylan Grimes, Dave Asprey, Dustin Martin. Obviously, Dusty being the big one out of those three. Grimes had a lot of hamstring injuries in the like this big span here about 2010 to 2014, and then
Mm.
finally started getting good. Asprey always was a key defender, and then like you see Vlosten and McIntosh, they were drafted together. They've always worked really well together. Lambert, Jason Castagna, and Dan Butler. I knew Lambert came from the rookie draft because he was like 24, 25 when he got drafted.
Mm.
He was one of those stories where drafters just overlooked him for many, many years. But Castagna and Butler were, I think, like 18, 19 when they got drafted. Daniel Rioli,
Yeah, sounds about right.
stories of the Riolis always have a home at Richmond. Nathan Broad came from WA. Also was a mature age recruit, I believe. I think he was like 22, 23, maybe when we picked him up.
Sounds about right. I think he played a few years for, I want to say Claremont, but I don't think it is.
And then Jack Graham, the big one, who was drafted in the 2016 draft, was debuted against Fremantle, I think, over in Perth, and he kicked like 4 goals against them, something like that. Kicked 3 goals, 4 goals, something like that, and just was an immediate mainstay. No, Graham.
Okay, I thought Townsend was the one that kicked.
Oh no, yeah, sorry. Townsend was the one that kicked the goals, but Graham was the debutant against Fremantle.
Yeah.
And then became a mainstay, and then the entire run up into the grand final. Same with Jacob Townsend. He came from the Gold Coast Suns, I believe.
Yeah.
No, sorry,
all the way around. He was more of a Fremantle specialist.
He came from the Giants. He was originally a Giants player.
Yeah.
And then he came to Richmond. We picked him up. Again, spent most of his time kind of in the VFL. Just tried to work his way in. Then eventually did work his way in. Kicked that massive bag against Fremantle, and then kicked another one a week later as well. And then just became like a really strong body for tackling. And he's known mostly for that big tackle he did in the grand final. I can't remember who it was against. It might have been against Big Sauce. I can't remember. And then obviously everyone knows about the Nankervis Prestia caddy trades. They were the big ones coming out of the 2016 off season. And look where we are.
Maybe I get your perspective, but there weren't that. Like, there was a lot of questions about that. Like,
the big one was mostly Prestia because of his injuries.
Yeah.
Caddy was a very average player, but he came from Geelong previously at the Suns, and then Nankervis
was an unknown at that point.
Yeah, he was playing second ruck at the time, and just wanted to play first.
When you say thing about like trading and people are like filling in the gaps and all that, like you can do it without trading, and this is probably where like a Suns or I know they got Rioli and all that, but
the Suns, you'd look at the Giants probably more so, because I think the Giants have done a lot
Giants,
better.
Yeah, exactly. They've just filled in with one, and they're looking to like really growth to the next level.
Yeah.
But as I said, like this is really just sticking with game plan and players, relying on your experience, even if it's not 100% getting the job done, and just learning from each year. And then obviously, as I said, they got lucky that, Caddy and Caddy had a really good year
at Geelong. And then
it was 20. Was it 27 or 18? He had a really good year.
Actually, no, I think his best year was 2018.
Yeah.
But 2017, he had a great year. Still, because won the Premiership, it's all there.
But so Prestia, hard to get on the park, but Nankervis obviously being the really big one.
Yeah. And then if we look over at the 2019 list, it's all pretty much the same. The only differences being that we picked up Shea Bolton, Liam Baker, and obviously Marlon Pickett came from the first mid-season draft. Only reason we got Pickett was because of Griggs' retirement due to injury. But for the most part, the entire list is pretty much the same. Again, we still got Caddy, Prestia, and Nankervis. And we also picked up the big man in Tom Lynch from Gold Coast. But you can see that there's barely any significant changes. There are only 4 player changes in between 2017 and 2019. Yeah,
and none between 2019 and 2020 in terms of Premiership list.
Oh, I mean, there is. Oh, no, it's actually, no, there isn't because of Ivan Soldo.
No player changes. There's different players.
Oh, different players, but no, yes.
Went into the scene.
Yeah, okay. So, like, if you look at the difference between 17 and 19, it's Jacob Townsend, Sean Grigg, Alex Rance, and I think it's Ellis? No, it's not Ellis. It's Butler.
Yeah. So,
instead of Butler, we had Shorty come in.
Yeah. So again, this just shows just why a good system's so good, because again, you only need to nail 1 or 2 draft picks, and they're not all going to be first rounders.
Yeah.
If you have a good system, as I said, I'm pretty sure Marley and Pickett, that was like pick 50, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it was the mid-season draft. Like it was It was
Oh, yeah, yeah,
brand
yeah.
new.
Colin
It
was
was the
missing.
draft that didn't
Yeah,
really matter. We originally didn't have an option in the mid-season draft, but because Greg retired due to just not being able to
yeah.
get his body right, we had that. We
Hmm.
got that option, got Pickett, and everyone knows the history now.
Yeah, debuted him on the grand final.
Yeah.
Um, honestly, we probably won't go through the Hawthorn repeat.
No,
I want to
everyone
go
knows
like to
that
the post.
pretty well at this point.
I want to, just for comparison, go to before free agency. So, some of the earlier lists and, just show some of the changes
How early are we looking
to
at?
how much. I'll just, you can go through them. Like, you can pick anyone that you really think's interesting. But I think when you look through them, like, how much different it was back there. Like, back then, it was nailing specific draft classes. You know what I mean? Like, it's less one or two players every now and then. And I think this is what adds to more of the competitive of the competition. Because you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to nail draft classes as much.
Yeah.
You just have to be relatively smart. The real
I
exception is the 2005 Swans.
the game the team that I selected was the 2008 Hawks because there was only one
Yeah,
trade and transfer player, and the rest came from the draft.
yeah, and that was Trent Crode, obviously being a very famous trade for Fremantle. Yeah, Shane Crawford, what an outlier
I know it
from
was
1991. And then the next one being Chance Bateman was from the 97 draft. So actually, it's 99. I can't tell. It's hard. I must admit, it's a bit hard to tell when it's exactly drafted, and I don't know them off the top of my head. I think actually Bateman's 99. So you got two players pre-90. One was 99. One was 92. So,
And then you just look at
yeah,
everyone else, and you look at how many of these players are still like involved in AFL in some way.
yeah,
Like
relevant. Yeah.
Stewie Jew was recently, Gold Coast coach.
Mm.
Grant Birchall, I think he's done assistant coaching here and there.
Yeah.
Jordan Lewis, Buddy Franklin, Jared Ruffhead. Obviously, Franklin is a little bit
Technically,
out of the limelight now, but he retired, not that long
yeah.
ago.
I mean, Croft's still a semi-presenter.
Croft is still
So's
around.
Campbell Brown too.
Sam
but-
Mitchell, Hawthorn coach. Luke Hodge works for Channel 7, etc., etc. Like, there are still players. Like, Mark Choco Williams is assistant coach.
Yeah.
Like, there's still a bunch of players that are still involved.
Pretty sure Xavier Ellis is an assistant coach somewhere too.
So it's crazy to see. And even if we look back even further, let's go to the earliest one that we've got here, being...
Oh, that's the Sydney one.
Is it the Sydney one?
Yeah, 2005. It lasts 20 years.
That one. Yes, 2005. The 2005 Premiership. Like, you can see some of these, like, a lot of these players, like, some of them are still very much known in the current scene. Like, Jude Bolton, for example. Actually, I think he's the only one.
Technically, Lachlan does stuff, involved with Indigenous, sort of pathways, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's true. But
And
like
Barry Hall's technically a commentator. Technically-ish.
People don't like to talk about Barry Hall to some degree for just how rough he was on field.
Honestly, he might not be. I think he did something and got the can, but I might be wrong on that.
But yeah, like Jude Bolton.
He does have that vibe.
Jude Bolton's the only one in this list, as far as we know, that's still in media, or someone involved in the AFL. I'm sure some players or former players could be in like sports performance and stuff like that, but they're not as big of a limelight situation.
I'll tell you what though, like now looking at it, it's actually pretty interesting. Like, you can look at all these players that are like from the trades and you're like, wow, for like, early 2000s where you're not seeing much, they did benefit a lot. But then you look at, some of the other players and, a lot of these were fairly grits and grinds sort of players. And I know you're probably a bit less inclined to know, but you know what I mean? Like, Lewis Roberts Thompson, Paul Bevan, like he was serviceable, but I don't think he was ever considered like one of the better defenders. Luke Ablett, I do not remember at all. Again, I was fairly young. Nick Fosdyke, again, a player you sort of remember, but not, Ben Matthews,
I don't
Jared
know too much
Crouch,
about Todd Keneally, but I know that he was one of the newer Irish players
first
to come
Irish.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fosdyke was talented, very fast. Sort of when the speed and athleticism was starting to shine in the game, like Tarkinelli was one of the first real line breakers.
Mm.
Like a lot of these players, again, it's sort of very old. Like a lot of them sort of remind me of those stocky grindhouse. Sydney were a bit more of the grits and grind sort of players, polished by, players like Nick Davis, even Adam Schneider, Eamon Buchanan, Jude Bolton. He
Yeah.
was very Brett Kirk as well. You know what I mean? So it was sort of like a good mix of, grits and grind players that was still very 2000s, especially early 2000s football. But you can actually start to see some of the, faster players getting opportunities. And even someone like Mickey O, he was someone that, because of his athleticism, he was able to dominate games as much as anything. So,
Yeah.
you're starting to see that shift between running athletes, with still your old school, or even Adam Goods in a way. Like, I know he was an athletic freak, but he was still that big body ball winner as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty cool to just look back and see how, like, what years players were drafted and how long clubs had to hold on to certain players just until they found success. Like Crawford, he was determined to be a one club player his entire career.
Yeah, for sure.
And he hung on for so long for that premiership.
Yeah, no, it was. And, as I say, because he just came a bit before, a bit after that Hawthorn dominance of the 80s.
Mm.
I don't think they won one in the 90s, did they?
I don't
No.
think so. I think that was mostly like Sydney coming in, Geelong, Brisbane with the
Eagles,
early 2000s,
Adelaide,
Essendon
North, I
as
think won
well,
one. Essendon 2000, yeah.
Port
Anyway,
with 04.
so yeah. But anyway, so we hope you enjoyed looking back. Again, sort of meant to be a preseason one, like showing with a lot of talk about trading, thought it'd be nice just to have a bit of nostalgia trip for me, and B, show that list building. It takes a lot longer than you think, and not one trade is probably ever going to be a decision maker from a premiership.
Yeah,
but it can top up, what is already a pretty good list. So
the Tom Lynch trade, for an example, was so important for us in our forward line because we were running one tall at that time with Freewalt, and then we had to switch it up because teams finally figured out how we built the one tall forward line, so we recruited a second tall.
Yeah,
but yeah, so it's things like that.
Yeah, and the other thing to note is that most teams, have 80% of their list 2 years before they win the premiership. Some teams have one, a few have three. I think there was one before, but can't quite see that. I think the maximum is 3. It depends where that Geelong 2011 one is, but yeah. So again, it's one of those things where, your recent draft is probably just as important as some of the foundations. So, and that's, again, when I went through my list, that's some of the players that I was trying to pick up, with my who I think can lift for your certain clubs. So we hope you appreciate that when I was looking into them. I was trying to think in those sort of terms.
Yeah.
And also, credit to the Du Bois. He's the one who did this. He has fantastic graphics. It's sort of taken a bit of I think he's had different jobs, so he's sort of been a bit light on some of them. But check out his Reddit account. He's got a site that he sometimes updates. And you know what? He produces some really nice graphics at times. So shout out to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah.
All right. I believe that will then do us for episode 49. Next week is episode 50. We don't have anything major planned for a big milestone like this, but we do have some cool information that we will share with you. We're looking forward to sharing it with you. We're very excited. But until then, thank you all so much for coming to hang out with us, coming to listen on YouTube and on Spotify. Obviously, check out our links down below as per normal. And whenever I'm going to a game, I'm trying to post it on the socials just to try and get a little bit more interaction. We're doing the best we can. We're both not very good with it, but we do our best.
Yeah.
I'm not good with Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not good with my own socials when it comes to like streams and stuff.
I'm not good at
so-
social media. I like being social. I'm not online
Well,
that much.
The algorithms are hard to vie against, and I don't really want to try and fight it. But yeah, if you wanna just keep up with us, feel free to go check it all out. I'm streaming still 3 times a week. There's no stream as of we're recording this, just because we're recording it late, so I didn't get time to do one today, but that's fine. I stream every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. AEDT if you want to come check me out. I usually stream on Wednesdays as well when the episode goes live, but normally a bit later, especially as I'm doing prep for a tournament that's coming up very soon. But otherwise, there are other streams during the week. That's all normally on my socials, so please go check it out at the Blaze Ninja on both Twitter and Instagram. But otherwise, that will do us. So thank you all once again, and hopefully we will see you all next week for episode 50. So until then, love you and leave you, and take care. Goodbye.